Welcome back to the Royals, the place where we don't just repeat headlines, we unpack them, challenge them, and get to the truth behind the noise. Today's story is one that cuts through a lot of the narratives you've been hearing lately. Because while some corners of the media continue to question his relevance, to question his choices, and yes, even to question his character, Prince Harry just reminded the world exactly who he is and what he stands for. And not with a tabloid interview, not with a carefully staged appearance, but with a speech delivered in Ukraine, of all places, at a time when the world is still grappling with one of the most devastating ongoing conflicts of our time. Now think about that for a moment. This wasn't a red carpet. This wasn't a charity gala in a ballroom somewhere. This was a global stage tied to real consequences, real lives, and real stakes. And Harry stepped into that space not as a royal figurehead, but as something much harder to dismiss. A veteran, a humanitarian, and a man willing to say something that actually matters. And yet, somehow, there are still voices trying to downplay it. So today, we're going to break this down properly. What he said, why it matters, and why the reaction to it says far more about the critics than it does about him. And yes, we're also going to talk about Meghan Markle, because whether people want to admit it or not, her influence, her partnership, and her presence are part of this story too. Because this isn't just about one speech, it's about a pattern, it's about growth, and it's about a version of royal life that doesn't rely on tradition to have impact. So let's get into it. When Harry took the stage at the Kyiv Security Forum, his message was clear, and it was deliberate. He spoke about leadership, specifically American leadership, but not in the way politicians usually do. There was no campaign tone, no grandstanding, no attempt to score points. Instead, there was something much simpler and much harder to ignore: responsibility. He pointed out that the United States has a unique role in the situation, not just because of its power, but because of past commitments. He referenced the assurances made when Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons, emphasizing that this moment isn't about charity. It's about honoring obligations. Now, that's a nuanced point. It's not flashy. It's not designed to go viral in a 10-second clip, but it's serious, it's grounded, and it reflects an understanding of global dynamics that critics often claim he doesn't have. And this is where things start to get interesting. Because for years now, there's been this attempt to box Harry into a very specific narrative. The idea that he's somehow lost or irrelevant or disconnected from serious global issues. And yet here he is, standing on an international platform, speaking about security, diplomacy, and human cost in a way that is both measured and impactful. So which version is real? The one painted in headlines, or the one we're actually seeing? And then he went further. He addressed Vladimir Putin directly, not with hostility, not with theatrics, but with a message that was firm and unmistakable. He spoke about the ongoing loss of life, about the absence of meaningful gains, and about the reality that this path, this continuation of war, leads nowhere but deeper loss. He said there is still a moment to stop. Now, let's be honest about something. It's very easy to sit back and say nothing. It's very easy to avoid controversy, to avoid criticism, to stay within the safe boundaries of what people expect from you, especially when you've already been under intense scrutiny for years. But Harry didn't choose the easy route, and that matters, because whether or not people agree with every word he says, the willingness to speak, to engage, to challenge, to call for something better, that's not something you can fake. That's not something you stumble into. That comes from conviction. And if any of this feels familiar, there's a reason for that. because we've seen this kind of moment before, not with Harry, but with his mother, Princess Diana. When Diana walked through that minefield in Angola, there were critics then too. People who said she was overstepping, that she was stepping into territory she didn't belong in. But history didn't remember those criticisms. History remembered the impact. It remembered the humanity. And now, years later, we're seeing echoes of that same approach. Harry made it clear in his speech he is not there as a politician. He's there as someone who has seen conflict, who understands service, and who refuses to become numb to the consequences of war. That last part is important, because one of the biggest risks in long-running conflicts is exactly that, numbness. The gradual shift where headlines stop shocking us, where numbers stop feeling like people, where suffering becomes background noise. And what Harry is pushing back against is that very idea. He's saying, don't look away, don't get comfortable, don't accept this as normal. Now let's talk about the reaction, because this is where things really reveal themselves. There are still those who try to dismiss moments like this, who reduce them to PR or question motives or shift the focus away from the message and onto the messenger. And you have to ask, why? Why is it so difficult for some to acknowledge when he does something meaningful? Part of it comes down to expectations. Harry was supposed to follow a certain path, stay within a certain structure, play a certain role. And when he stepped away from that, when he chose a different life, it disrupted a lot of assumptions. And that disruption hasn't sat well with everyone. But there's another layer to this too, and that's where Meghan comes in. Because you cannot talk about Harry's current path without acknowledging Meghan Markle. And not in the way she's often portrayed, reduced to headlines or framed as controversial, but in terms of what she actually represents in this partnership. Clarity, strategy, awareness. Together they've built something that operates outside the traditional royal system. And that independence allows them to engage with issues in a way that's direct, personal, and sometimes uncomfortable for those who prefer the old model. And let's be real about something. Meghan has faced a level of scrutiny that goes far beyond normal criticism. And yet, despite that, the work continues. The messaging continues. The focus on humanitarian issues continues. That doesn't happen by accident. That happens because there's alignment, because there's intention, because there's a shared vision of what their platform can be used for. So when Harry stands on a stage like this, delivering a speech that resonates globally, it's not happening in isolation. It's part of a broader approach to how they use their voice. And whether people like it or not, that voice is being heard. At the same time, we have King Charles III preparing for a state visit to the United States. A highly structured, highly symbolic event tied to tradition, diplomacy and protocol. And there's a tendency to compare these two paths, to frame them as opposing forces. But that comparison misses the point, because Harry isn't trying to replicate what the monarchy does. He's not trying to compete with it. He's doing something entirely different. He's operating in a space where impact isn't measured by ceremony, but by engagement. Not by tradition, but by relevance. And that difference is exactly what makes moments like this speech stand out. It's not about titles. It's about action. It's not about hierarchy. It's about voice. And back in California, in Montecito, Harry and Meghan are continuing to build that life on their own terms, raising their children, shaping their work, and navigating a level of public attention that would be overwhelming for most people. And yet they keep going, they keep showing up, they keep speaking out. That's not something you can dismiss as accidental, that's consistency, That's resilience. That's a decision, made over and over again, to stay engaged even when it would be easier to step back. So, when you look at this speech, when you really look at it, it's not just a moment. It's part of a larger story. A story about redefining what influence looks like, about stepping outside of expectation and still finding ways to matter, about choosing purpose over approval. And maybe that's what makes it uncomfortable for some, because it challenges the idea that there's only one way to have impact. But here's the reality. Whether people praise him or criticize him, whether headlines spin it one way or another, Prince Harry is using his platform. He's engaging with global issues. He's speaking in spaces that carry weight. And that's something worth paying attention to. So now I want to hear from you. When you watch moments like this, when you hear what he actually said, not just the reaction to it, what do you think? Do you see growth? Do you see leadership? Or do you think the criticism still holds weight? And what about Meghan's role in all of this? Because, like it or not, this chapter of Harry's life is one they're building together. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's have a real conversation about it. And if you appreciate this kind of breakdown, if you want content that goes beyond the surface, that challenges the narrative instead of just repeating it, make sure you subscribe to The Royals. Like the video, share it with someone who's been following this story, and if you want to support the channel directly, you can use the Super Thanks feature right below. It genuinely helps keep this kind of content going. Until next time, stay sharp, stay curious, and don't just follow the story. Understand it.